He was very good, so I remember him very, very dearly. You know, we all had contact with very special people in one way or another. Because I grew up on Trade Street, sort of. My father had a restaurant, the Tryon Cafe, and it was sort of a mecca for anybody who wanted food or a cup of coffee. And so I saw, from a distance at least, a lot of very special people. I remember seeing one day F. Scott Fitzgerald, and I knew that he was, I was just a kid, but I understood that he was going through a bad time. He was fighting alcoholism, and his wife was in a sanitarium, I think, in Asheville. And I didn't know what despair was until I just saw it in his face. Even as a child, I realized he was going through a bad time. But I think we all have been very fortunate with the people that we've met over the years.
I was thinking about last night about growing up in Tryon, and I said, what can I tell those people? And I thought maybe they talked about the ends and so forth, but I was going to talk about the smells I remember on Main Street. My wife says I don't smell too good. Maybe I don't now, but I can remember. And things used to smell better than they do now. They used to smell. Most of the buildings on Main Street in Tryon, from Orange Pharmacy up to Bill's Jewelry, are the same ones that were there when I was growing up, and a few more down next to Count's Hardware. But we started down on the end. There was a shoe shop. And this is, you know, when you could open the doors, there was no air conditioning, there was no air handlers like we have in our stores now. Everybody had the doors wide open. And the shoe shop would smell of fresh leather, shoe polish, you could smell it. You walked on up the street a little bit to the barber shop. That's when they had lather and they shaved around the ears, you know that? A lot of men would have a shave every day, they'd put lotion on. They'd have a Clark Gable haircut and slick it down with Lucky Strike or something, some kind of something like that. It would smell good. You could smell it out on the street. Then on up to A&P store, they were roasting 8 o'clock coffee. The whole street smelled like fresh coffee. Then up to the Ballinger Company. Big wide doors open, peanut popper out on the outside, popping fresh peanuts. You would walk inside, smell lemons and orange. Can you smell an orange or a lemon or a ripe banana in a supermarket anymore? You can't. Even if you put them up to your nose, you can't smell it. Raisins in a box, maybe a 50-pound box of raisins would smell. The whole store would smell like tutti frutti, you know. That's just some of the smell. On up to Miss Ledine's Pharmacy. That's a favorite, I guess, was toasted pimento cheese sandwich and Biltmore ice cream milkshake. And it would smell something you just couldn't believe. Then you could walk behind the building, and that's when most of the men went behind the building to urinate. Hold it back. Smell like urine. Then when I was growing up, and I might say all of this was happening during the Depression, very little money around. My mother raised produce. We sold eggs. We sold milk. One of my jobs was to deliver milk in a half-gallon jar, buttermilk. And I soon learned the smell of corn liquor real quick. My mother said, don't bring a jar home that smells like liquor. And so my job was to go into the house and put the buttermilk in the ice box. Most people had ice boxes, some refrigerated. Nobody locked the doors back in those days. They didn't even know where your front door key was, you know. And I'd smell up the jar and bring a clean jar back home. And then around the same time the bootleggers put out a smaller half-a-gallon jar. I wasn't supposed to bring those home. Not that anybody drank bootleg liquor, but I had a couple of customers that sold it, and a couple of them drank it. A lot knew it, but that was just the way of life. There were hospital exchanges now. That used to be a vacant lot. And on Saturday especially, farmers would come into town with the produce and corn, both green and in the bottle, and it was sold right there on Main Street. When I was growing up, I used to lived up the railroad track, and everywhere we went, we walked. And I always went to the movie on Saturday afternoon. When I was very small, my mother would make me walk all the way down the railroad in front of the movie and walk across the street to the movie. Down on the lower end of town, we had a beer joint. And Saturday afternoon especially, the boys would come into town looking for a fight. And we had several fights there. Nothing ever happened. Nobody ever got arrested. Our one policeman was probably on the other end of town. He didn't see it. But it was a great place to grow up, and I have fond memories of Tryon and the people that have made up Tryon.
There's one place you didn't mention about Smell was A.J. County.
Yeah.
Hot dogs and hamburgers and onion and chili. That really smelled.
And I'm glad you started mentioning businesses. I was going to ask about some of the businesses that have come and gone. One was my grandfather had a barber shop that was under the bulletin office. And the store there now, the Trade Street Casuals and the bakery, that was set back about 10 feet. So there was a big paved area there, and you went down the side of the bulletin office and underneath. And his barber shop was under there with a shoe shine chair and showers and everything. And Holland, you have a unique distinction in that, weren't you one of the firstborn in the hospital that was over what's now Owens Pharmacy?
I'm not sure that I was one of the first born, but there was a 12-bed hospital over Owens Pharmacy called, I think, the Brady Clinic. And there was one boy and two girls born within the same period of 2 weeks. And we grew up calling ourselves the triplets, but the mother stayed in the hospital 2 or 3 weeks there. Dorothy Quest, who some of you might remember, later had a studio in what had been the operating suite of the hospital. Are you going to get on the institutions as well as businesses?
This is fine, yeah, you go ahead.
I think one of the great institutions was the Linnea Library. And some great characters connected with it. Miss Mary Frances Carpenter was born on a sampan on the Yellow River in China. And I presume she was the daughter of missionaries, although I don't remember for sure. And she ran the Linnea Library with an iron hand for many decades. She reviewed every new book, and if she thought it was unsuitable, she did not censor it. She locked it up in the closet. And if you had, as a high school student, if you had permission to read that book, she would unlock the closet and let you have it. But I worked there a while, and Miss Carpenter was about 4'8" and humpbacked. And she lived with Miss Helen Stearns, whose brother, I guess, was Frank Stearns. But Miss Stearns used to bring Miss Carpenter to work every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And she would stop about in front of Owens Pharmacy and put her car in low gear and let the clutch out just a fraction of an inch. She was probably doing 12,000 RPM. And start blowing the horn before she turned right to go across the railroad so the train would know she was coming. That is the honest truth. One of of my jobs when I worked at the library was to go up and down Melrose Avenue to deliver a choice of 3 or 4 books to ladies who did not feel like walking to the library. And I made a few friends that way, a lot of acquaintances. And one friend was a lady who was born Catherine Tobin. I don't know whether that name means anything to anybody, but she was Mrs. Frank Lloyd Wright. And she ended up living in a house on Melrose Avenue. I delivered her books every few weeks. And she once gave me a letter when I was a college student of introduction to Frank Lloyd Wright. But she said, if he reads who signed that letter, he'll probably kick you out. Some names that didn't get mentioned was David Niven. What a thrill it was to have David Niven ask me what the score was at the football game. And Zachary Scott, who was the sister to Mrs. Heron, I designed Mrs. Heron's house. And her father, Dr. Scott, had another daughter who was Mrs. Claber, who was King Ranch in Texas. And Dr. Scott came one time to see Mrs. Heron's new house, and I was there. We walked through the whole house. He looked at everything. He never said a word. He got back in the car, and he was driving, as his chauffeur was driving him away, he said a question that was a comment that was an enigma to all of us. See what you can make of it. He said, I hope it was a good year for the calves.
Jim and Seth, well, I know Harold too, all played ball and together. And I'd like for them to tell us a little bit about sports. Let me just mention one thing. When I was in high school, there was Saluda High School and Mill Spring High School, Green Creek High School, and Tryon High School. And we had county tournaments that were wild. People were very territorial, and I mean, there were fights, and sometimes when I was out on the court, I was almost afraid to get too close to the opposing team's side. I mean, there wasn't much between the floor and the seats, but I sort of stayed away from the opposing fans sometimes because they were pretty fanatical about the games. You want to make some comments about?
You're all full stuff, I think.
No, talking about high schools, when we were in high school, it was Sunny View High School. There wasn't one at Green Creek. And Sunny View played on the outdoor court. And see, when Lib played at Tryon, it was played on the outdoor court. When we came along, WPA had built that big new gym that everybody doesn't have anything to do with that. We thought it was the greatest thing that ever arrived. Before I talk about sports, I'm going to go back to Mr. Schletter a minute. It was all of our heroes, so to speak, as well as a man with beard. But he played football for Clemson. He played tackle. And when they had the all Clemson team for 50 years, he was mentioned on it. But he was talking about when he played at Clemson, Georgia Tech was their big rival. He said they were going down to Atlanta to play Tech, and the papers had headlines, watch your letter. He kicked off for Clemson. He said they lined up, got ready to kick off, and he went up and he missed the ball completely. He said if there was a hole that big, he could have gotten in. He stressed sportsmanship more than winning. He liked to win, but he really stressed sportsmanship. And if he caught any of us doing anything that was out of line, we caught it. And that's one thing I think we need to go back to a little bit, because he really did stress sportsmanship. And he knew how to handle boys. I don't know about girls, but he knew how to handle boys. Go ahead. You can wait.
Go ahead. No. I think all these guys have been saying, it just bring back so many memories to all of us. Seth and Harold were outstanding football players and basketball players. I only played basketball, but I wasn't as good as they were. And so I spent most of my time on the bench and usually down at the end of the bench. And for me, a successful basketball game was for our team to win by a big margin, because I would get to play the last part of the game if we won by a big margin. The next best thing was for us to lose by a big margin. I get to play then. And I didn't get to play until my senior year in high school, and then I don't think I'd have gotten to play then, except at some time or another, all season, somebody had the mumps. So I got to play. But I remember in my junior year in high school, and I had played in an important game all year. Sunnyview, having no gymnasium, they would play all of their games over in the visiting team's gymnasium. And they played us twice over in Tryon, and we beat them badly twice. And so for the finals of the basketball tournament, which is played over here in Stearns Gym, Sunnyview got the lead, and we couldn't believe it. They're beating us. It was the first time I ever got the feeling of the county versus Tryon. If there was anyone in that gymnasium pulling for Tryon, I couldn't hear them. They were all pulling for Sunnyview. And we were getting beat. But we still had a chance. And I had been hot in practice. And the Coach Caldwell, noted that. And so he comes down to the end of the bench and puts his hand on my shoulder and says, "Jimmy, I'm sending you in. Mind you, I hadn't played the close game all year. And I'm sending you in. I want you to shoot every time you get your hands on the ball." "Yes, sir." So I got into the game, and I followed his instructions. I got my hands on the ball, and I don't care where I was on the court. I shot. And I was so pumped up, it would not hit the basket of the backboard, it'd go way over the backboard. We lost that game, but it was something. Okay.
Like I said, this was just getting over the Depression, so there wasn't a whole lot of money around at that time, but the schools operated on a shoestring. Teachers were paid practically nothing. They bought nothing new. Everything was used and wore out just about, including the